Welcome to the Foundation of Arguments. My name is Julia Westlake, and I will be your facilitator today. In this particular presentation, we're going to cover what topics are, issues, stances and claims, premises, putting your argument together, finding quality resources, value assumptions, reality assumptions, real values, and ideal values. It's guaranteed to be fun, so come along with me. Now, topics. Topics are often a point of confusion for many students. So topics seem simple, and they are. Topics are the overreaching themes upon which we decide to form opinions. Here are some examples of topics. We have general topics, like healthcare, birth control, and gun control, and then we narrow those down to subtopics. For instance, we might have healthcare as a general topic. We might drill down a little bit and say, oh, I want to talk about healthcare reform, and drill down even more and say, I want to talk about the healthcare reform law. Each one of these is technically a topic. We've just narrowed down that topic, right? You might think about this as brainstorming. When you brainstorm, you begin to narrow down your topic. Similarly, there's a chain. We can start with the broad or general topic. Then as you see, we go down from there. Narrow the topic. Another example would be birth control. That's a broad general topic, and a subtopic under that would be birth control for minors. We could go down even further and say birth control without parental consent, meaning you're probably giving it to minors if parental consent would be an issue. Gun control, broad topic, lots of different things you can talk about under there. For instance, you might want to talk about restricting the purchase of guns, or even requiring mental health exams prior to the purchase. Each of these things have a broad theme, then we narrow it down, and then we do what's called issues. Come from topics. Issues are the questions we ask about the topics and subtopics in order to form opinions. Without issues, we would have no reason to form opinions. They give us really the question that we need to answer with our arguments. Let's look at some examples. Here we have topics, subtopics, which you just identified on the previous slides. Then we have issues. Now let's consider healthcare. That's a topic, really broad and general. We've narrowed it down to healthcare reform law. Healthcare reform law might have even been the first thing that popped into your head. However, it still falls under the topic healthcare, even though it's a subtopic. You could go either way when you're narrowing it down. You could narrow it down first and then identify the major topic heading that you're under, or you can identify a major topic heading and then pick up the subtopic. So the issue under this subheading or subtopic is the healthcare reform law legal? It's a question we're going to answer with our argument. Birth control, and birth control for minors in specific, we might ask the question, should school nurses be allowed to give minors birth control without parental knowledge? That's an issue. Finally, we have gun control and requiring background checks prior to purchase. We might ask the question or identify the issue, is a 3-day waiting period sufficient time to run through a background check? We might also ask things like, should a mental health check be considered part of the background check process for owning a gun? Those are all issues. They all are aligned directly with our topics and subtopics, and they're the questions that we are going to answer whether we voice the question or not with our argument. Now, there's some important things to remember about issues and topics because oftentimes they are very confused by students. So let's start here. Topics are broad themes. Issues, on the other hand, are narrowed down questions about subtopics. Topics encompass many issues. As you can imagine, because topics and even subtopics are generally really broad, you could ask lots and lots of different questions about those topics and subtopics, and thus you would have many different issues. Additionally, the topics follow a chain of broad topic down to very refined subtopics. Issues, on the other hand, address one specific subtopic, and really they address very refined subtopics, typically if they're good issues that you can really form a very specific opinion around. Sometimes the issues, though, can be more general, and thus they give you lots more wiggle room in what you're going to form an opinion about. However, if you narrow down what your opinion is going to be about, you've actually narrowed down the topic. One thing to remember is even when it sounds like the issue could address many topics, it is not actually addressing many topics. It is addressing a broader or different topic than you have identified. For instance, if we were to look back at the gun issue, your issue that you identify might be, should background checks be necessary for weapon ownership? Well, we could be talking about gun control, we could be talking about knife control, we could be talking about AR, which is assault rifle guns, we could be talking about a variety of things. Either the issue is very broad and it actually addresses not gun control and not knife control and none of those things, it addresses weapon control and whether or not that should be regulated. It either addresses that or it may be addressing multiple things, but we're going to have to narrow down what exactly we're going to address under that issue with our argument. So generally speaking though, even when it sounds like it could address many, many topics, we're actually going to refine that issue and we're only going to address one. Otherwise, we're going to go all over the place and we're going to get lost when we present an argument. Now, a thing to remember about topics, is often the issue will reflect how refined the topic is. So sometimes the issue is part of the topic, but often the issue is only represented by a phrase or a word, and we're going to look at an example of that. So issues contain a word or phrase that reflects the topic or subtopic being discussed. For instance, a topic or subtopic would be healthcare reform law. The issue you could pair with that is the healthcare reform law legal? Here we see that the healthcare reform law appears both in the topic as well as the issue. So they kind of work together, but they are very different things. Now that you've identified an issue or a question you can address, we're going to pick a stance. Things you should know about picking a stance. Picking a stance is the same thing as stating your argument. And an argument always includes your claim and your premises. Remember that I say you should have at least 2 premises. However, the book that you're probably reading tells you you need at least 1. However, you'll see later on in the presentation that that's not such a good idea to just have 1. So you probably have 2 or more. Another thing you should remember is do at least some research prior to making a claim. Otherwise, you risk sounding incredibly misinformed. Like this fellow, a fast food burger contains meat. Thus, it's a good source of protein in a healthy diet. If you came up and said that, some people might think you're really misinformed, or there's something that they're completely missing that you haven't filled them in on, or they might be misinformed as well. Your claim shapes your premises, so you word your claim very carefully, and it's okay if you reword it multiple times. That, in fact, is completely and utterly normal for you to go back and wordsmith your premises and your claim. Aristotle. He's perhaps the author or founder, I like to say, of our class. He was once quoted as saying, "A statement is persuasive and credible either because it is directly self-evident or because it appears to be proved from other statements that are so." Blah, blah, bliggity blah, right? Let's look at what that actually means. Here we have a tricycle. Now, we could have a self-evident claim. The tricycle on the right-hand side of the screen is red. Look, it's red. Unless you're colorblind, you can see that. If you are colorblind, you can ask someone else. It's red. Now, why is it self-evident? Because you can easily look and see that it's red. You can identify what's right in front of your face. You've also got unstated premises. The unstated premise is the person that is reading this or whom you're telling can actually see the color red. Another unstated premise is that the person actually knows which tricycle you're speaking about. So unstated, self-evident premises, self-evident claim. Now, proved by other statements. This is what we're primarily going to do in my classes, so if you're in my class, that's what we're focused on, not necessarily self-evident. Here we have 3 statements. The tricycle on the lower right is intended for ages 1 through 3 when the child is seated properly. The adjustable seat height allows for the average 1 to 3-year-old to place his or her feet on the ground while seated. The handlebar length is correctly positioned to allow the average 1 to 3-year-old to hold the handlebars to steer while seated. Wow, that's a lot of information to get to the fact that, hey, that tricycle there, it's intended for 1 to 3-year-olds. But you have all the information, the premises that you need to determine whether or not the claim is appropriate or not. If we were to insert the word because prior to our premises, this would be a good indicator that that's a premise. For instance, the tricycle on the lower right is intended for ages 1 through 3 when the child's seated properly. Because the adjustable seat height allows for the average 1 to 3-year-old to place his or her feet on the ground. Because the handlebar length is correctly positioned to allow for the average 1 to 3-year-old to hold the handlebars to steer while seated. Those tell us we have premises and we have a claim. Let's look further. Okay, the claim is like a roof on a home or a building. And hopefully as we go through this analogy throughout the presentation, you'll agree with me. So a roof, if we think about it, tops everything off and visually brings the structure together and it contains it in one place, right? If we didn't have a roof on top of a house, what would happen? Well, we could see in from the top, it might not look right, it might get rained on and everything inside would get ruined. It wouldn't really be a building, right? If it didn't have a roof, it would just kind of be some walls standing out in a field somewhere or in the city somewhere. So think about that. The claim is like a roof. So when we make a claim and a conclusion are the same thing. Those words are used interchangeably, right? A claim is only one part of the argument. We talked about this. An argument consists of both a claim and then premises. It's only a singular claim, so that's why you don't see claims. This isn't an insurance company, it's not Progressive, we're not the claims department. We're making a single claim. You should always be able to say things like, therefore, due to, accordingly, hence, thus, as a result of, right before you say your claim, and it should make complete and utter sense. Let's look at an example. The tricycle's adjustable seat height allows for the average 1 to 3-year-old to place his or her feet on the ground while seated. The handlebar length is correctly positioned to allow the average 1 to 3-year-old to hold the handlebars to steer while seated. Therefore, when seated properly, the tricycle on the lower right is intended for ages 1 through 3. As you can see, we used one of the claim/conclusion indicator words, which was therefore, and that indicates that this sentence, this last part of the sentence actually, is our claim. Now, you may be saying, wow, wait a minute, on the last slides, you just had this as 3 separate sentences. Yes, you can actually wordsmith and move the words around. It's a good idea to keep your premises together and your claim kind of flowing either prior to or after, not interchangeably in between. That's totally possible too. So notice that you can switch things up. They don't all have to be separate sentences. They can be all one sentence. It could be multiple sentences. It depends on the length of your argument, what you're trying to state, as well as how long your argument presentation is going to be. Whether it's a 5-paragraph essay, or if it's going to be a 50-paragraph essay, or if you're going to present this in a business meeting as bullet points, or if you're going to give a talk on TED for 25 minutes, or you're going to do a 3-hour YouTube presentation. It all depends on those things. Your audience, how long, what the format's going to be, etc. Those are themes we'll explore later on. So what about making a claim? That's what we really want to do. We want to spout off our opinions, right? Well, we can. The claim contains portions of the premises. This is why it may be necessary to reword as you go. Because if you haven't formed your premises before you get to your claim, you need to make sure the wording matches a little bit. So let's look at how we can do that. For example, here's our statement. The tricycle's adjustable seat height allows for the average 1 to 3-year-old to place his or her feet on the ground while seated. The handlebar length is correctly positioned to allow the 1 to 3-year-old to hold onto the handlebars and steer while seated. Therefore, when seated properly, the tricycle on the lower right is intended for ages 1 through 3. Now, in green, can see green, assuming you can, or prior to the semicolon, you can't. And those are our claims. After the semicolon, where we start therefore, and it's in red, that's our claim. Try to look at the statements and match up which parts actually repeat themselves. Can you see it? Let's look. We've got 1 to 3-year-old right there, and then we've got while seated, or when seated properly, actually repeated several times. So how the premises and claim refer to each other, the placement, the usage, and so forth, depends on the syllogism. That's a mouthful. Syllogism is just a fancy word for pattern, or a logical pattern, being used to form the argument. Now you may be saying to yourself, syllogisms, are you going to cover that in this presentation? Nope, that's in a separate presentation because it takes a little while longer. Just know they exist, and how you put these things in, how you repeat the various clauses, depends on the syllogism you're using. All right, so premises. Premises are the next component of our argument. They're like the walls of a structure or a house. They hold everything up and they give it shape or strength. You'll notice that I have a brick wall, and then I have kind of like framing made out of wood with some beams in it. This is a good analogy actually, because sometimes our premises are really robust. They could withstand just about anything on their own. That would be like having a brick wall. Think of the 3 Little Pigs story, right? Some hay, some wood house, a brick house. So the brick house is going to be really hard to knock down, not impossible, just difficult. And it's going to withstand a lot more battering, right, from people trying to knock your argument down. Whereas the wood structure, the framing, that's going to be harder than straw, right? Think of the 3 Little Pigs. But it's still going to be easier to knock down, right? The wolf got through. He blew and he blew and he knocked it over. So keep this in your mind. All right, some things to note about premises. Oh, there's our red tricycle again. Premises are the component of an argument. That's right. Premises can be stated or unstated, like we said before. In this class, you need to state your premises. So if you are in one of my classes, and probably just about anybody else's critical thinking or writing class, you need to state your premises. In fact, it's really good to state your premises because in the real world, the audience dictates whether or not you need to state your premises. We analyze the audience and decide what they know or should know prior to you presenting the argument, and we decide, do I need to be overtly obvious about my premises, or can they fill in some blanks? The blanks they can fill in, those are the premises you don't have to state in the real world. In the classroom, you should probably state them until you get really good at analyzing your audience, right? Don't have to go crazy. You can make some assumptions, but you probably need to state your main premises, at least, in order to successfully convey your argument, right? So in this class, for your purposes, just know you need to state your premises. In the real world, you need to analyze your audience and decide what they do and don't know prior to hearing your argument, and that's how you decide which premises you're going to use. All right, you should be able to insert words like since, as indicated by, for, in that, in so much as, may be inferred from, and because before you present your premises, and it should make sense. Tried this with the claims. Does it work with premises? Let's see. The tricycle on the lower right is intended for ages 1 through 3 when the child is seated properly, because the adjustable seat height and handlebar length are appropriately designed for the average 1 to 3-year-old to place his or her feet on the ground while seated and steer. So as you can see, we still have our 2 premises. Can you pick them out in green? They're after the word because. There's still 2. And our claim is still in red. It's still the tricycle on the lower right is intended for ages 1 through 3 when the child is seated properly. But now we've got it all in one sentence. And we've used an indicator word for a premise. You could actually split this up into multiple sentences and use other indicator words if you'd like, but this is how we chose to string this one together to show you how we can take the same ideas, We can be more concise and narrow it down. Look, some wordsmithing, and we have the same argument now presented in one sentence. This would make for a great thesis statement. Wait, arguments can be thesis statements and topic statements. Oh my gosh, this is a new revelation. We should write it down. Evidence. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Evidence is like the foundation of a house. It ensures that everything stays put and can stand up on its own. Let's consider this. There's a guy. He built a house. A foolish man built his house upon the sand. The rains came down, and the foundation washed away, and his house ended up in pieces all over the sand. A wise man built his house upon a rock. I know this is a children's song, but it will be a good way for you to remember it. A rock like concrete, and then when the rains came down, it stayed put. Didn't go anywhere. Why? Because the evidence, the foundation for his house, stayed in one place. Finding quality resources. Everybody wants them. How do you get them? Oh my goodness, let's find out. Make an outline or draft of what you need to write about. Oh my gosh, this requires actually writing out your argument in draft form. Everyone gasp. I know, I'm asking you to write a draft, or at least scribble some stuff on a piece of paper that says, I think I'm going to talk about these things. I think these are going to be my points. Why would I do that? Well, based on your outline or draft, you're going to decide where your holes are. What is weak? Which premises are made out of straw? Which ones are made out of wood? Which ones are made out of brick and rock solid? And that's where you're going to see a hole, right? And you're going to go fill that hole in your argument with evidence. You're going to strengthen and support. Put some support beams in your house, right? You're going to hold up those walls. We're going to frame it. We're going to give it some structure. And that is how you know what evidence you need to go find. But if you don't write it out, you're just guessing in the dark like, oh, I have a paragraph here, and I think I need some evidence in it. You may not actually need any evidence in that paragraph at all. You may need a whole bunch of evidence 2 paragraphs down. You'll never know that unless you write your comments out before you go out and look for evidence. Very important. So in other words, if you fail to outline, where are you going to know that you need support? That should be the idea that you leave this slide with. The quality of your evidence determines whether or not your argument is easy to overcome or not. So choose wisely, my young friend. If I was to tell you a story about a guy and he goes to another planet and he meets blue creatures, and he only meets them because he's a disabled Marine, and he goes inside an avatar. Would you know that I'm talking about the movie Avatar until I got to the end? Well, you might. But if I provided more evidence, more quality evidence earlier on, you probably would have gotten to that point and been on board with what I was talking about, unless you've seen the movie a whole bunch and really latch on to that. So the quality, and when we present that information, clues in and grabs a hold of our audience and says, oh yeah, I agree with you. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Oh, I get it. Let's read more. Quality of evidence will draw people in, will keep them there, and will have them agreeing with you earlier. And as you go throughout, they'll keep agreeing with you, the better quality evidence you have. Seems logical, right? So, what about if you just go in circles? Well, I made a claim, and then I went on the web and I found somebody else who made the same claim, and they seem really smart, so I'm going to quote them. Have you actually proved anything? Or have you gone in circles restating your claim? You've probably gone in circles restating your claim. Not going to help you, especially if not everybody is going to agree with you right off the bat, right? There's always going to be some skeptics. You might have to try a little harder. So, if you try a little bit harder, what do you need to be looking for? You need to look for evidence that's going to support or prove your premises are true or plausible, and therefore those premises can then prove or support your claim as either plausible or true. Right? So kind of think about building an overreaching argument for your presentation, either oral presentation or written, and then think about building little mini arguments that go along the way. And your evidence is part of those little mini arguments, if you will. Finding quality resources. We have our little guy on the right. He's like, how am I going to do this? Well, first thing we're going to do, we're going to think of academic words or smart words or words that other people may use for the content you want to search. Remember, you have to think like a researcher or whomever it is you're trying to find their information. No one's going to call academic success, if that's the topic we're researching, student college stuff. I don't think you're going to find that. In fact, I challenge you to go to Google and see how many pages you have to click through before you get to something that's even remotely related to academic success. It's a great challenge. It's going to take you a while. If you search that term, you will get junk. You're going to have to pick terms that other people are going to use, like researchers or bloggers, looking for blogs, or other people in general are going to use when they're writing about the topic. So what I recommend you do is you get out your piece of paper, your scrap paper, and you write down other words or phrases people may use when referring to what you're going to write about. Like, if you're writing about academic success, you could call it student success. Study skills for college, because those would be related. Traits of high GPA students. Time management skills for academics. Organizational skills. Development of good study habits. Plus lots of other stuff that you could come up with when you're brainstorming or outlining your work. Outlining, brainstorming, this lady is crazy. Not crazy. Try it. Way easier to write, spend less time on your assignments, guaranteed. Finding quality resources now. You have to think about the type of information you're looking for. It's generally a bad idea to go to a general database or the most generic database that you can find. It isn't going to have really refined information, especially if you're doing this research for academic purposes. So you need to think about what fields are going to do research on the topics you're looking for, on the issues you're looking for. Then you can use a list of specialized databases, and you can actually narrow it down. Your library actually probably, if it has an online library, has a link that says something like specialized databases, specialized research tools, etc. And go in there and you're going to be able to say, oh, this one's a psychology database. They probably publish stuff on psychology. So I could probably find articles about students and procrastination, because procrastinating is usually studied by what? Psychologists, sociologists, and lots of other people too. Might be even studied by educators. You might find an education database. That would probably be a good place to go research academic success, as would the psychology database. If you're looking for academic success for business schools, you might go to a business database, etc. So, don't like libraries? Well, Google has an app for that. I'm just kidding, it's not an app. But there is a thing called Google Scholar. Just go to Google, type in Google Scholar or Scholar, and it will come up. You click on it. It works just like a really high-powered database. And if you're logged into your school and they have an agreement with Google, you can actually access Google Scholar inside your school's electronic database for their library, and it'll show you whatever they have on tap at the library, because things are on tap, right? Just like anywhere else. Okay, now that you have your search terms, you know the type of info you're going to need to fill in the holes of your paper, and the databases you can search, what do you do now? Well, you gotta go search. And if you search and your search terms are lacking, I suggest go back to your list of words and phrases that you picked, pick a different one. It's likely that small adjustments or tweaking or wordsmithing will actually make a huge difference in the quality of results that you get. So if you find one phrase like student success is not working, go to the next one on your list, or student success for college seniors, student success for college freshmen. Tweak it a bit. Now, if you use the advanced search, that can limit things like when it was published. Usually, closer to today that it was published is usually better unless you're looking for historical information. And you can exclude terms you don't want to look for. So, for instance, if you're looking for academic success or student success, but you don't want it to refer to elementary students, you could eliminate the word elementary or primary or words that are associated with little kids in K through 12. If you want, you can actually add words. So you could look at student success and the word college so that you get more results. You could even look at certain types of publications. That's something you can do in advanced search. So there's lots of options to play along with. And that way you can kind of filter out junk before you see the results. Another thing you can do is read the abstracts. On Google, you'll know it as the 2 to 3 sentences that fall below the link that you're going to click on. It works the same way in a library, in case you haven't been in an electronic library. This works the same way, but they're called abstracts. And those are usually little summaries that the author has submitted and said, hey, this is a really good gist of what this article is going to be about. If you go through and read those, it saves you from clicking on a lot of different things, and saving you time means you can get through more stuff and not waste as much time. So if it doesn't look like it's going to work for you, keep scrolling. However, caveat to that, if you're not having a whole lot of success and you've almost gone through your entire list of terms, I suggest you actually go back and read some of those articles that you don't think are related and see what they're actually talking about. And you might get an idea of how you need to change your search terms, because you probably not thought up the right words or phrases to get you where you need to be, or you have a fundamental misunderstanding about the topic. You just need to be better informed. And no better way to be informed than to go and look at what your search terms took you to and try to make an assessment and use some critical thinking about how you should change your search terms. So putting your argument together. This is usually the trickiest part. We understand how to make a claim or express an opinion. We understand how to give reasons. We understand how to go to the library. Now, how do we put it all together? Well, I want you to think about the topic like the county you live in. I want you to think about the subtopic like the city or even the neighborhood if it's a really narrowed down subtopic. I want you to think about the issue like the street you live on, right? Or somebody lives on. Then the evidence is the foundation of your house, something you're probably going to go look at first, right? You pour it first when you're building a structure. You don't have to find all your evidence at once, but you should at least look at it first. Then we're going to probably come up with some premises, and those are going to be your walls, support beams, etc. in the house. Then you're going to put the roof on last, and that's the claim. Now, that's not all that appears in an argument when you present it. You just don't usually go off spouting one sentences like, oh, hey, that red tricycle over there is red and it's built for 1 to 3-year-olds. Here's why. You don't usually go around doing that, although you can. Most arguments for this class, though, are going to be a little bit longer. So we like to add some furniture to our house, right? That adds interest. Ooh, flashing interest. IKEA chairs, right? We add interest with quotes, anecdotal stories, appropriate rhetoric. It jazzes up our presentation. It gives it some life, some color, some pizzazz. Don't go overboard with that. It distracts, just like that flashing chair from IKEA distracts you in this presentation. It can be distracting when you're presenting an argument, so go light on those. Use them sparingly. Use them to draw your audience in. If your premises or claim are kind of boring, you need to jazz them up. Now, let's think about this without the little flashing chair. So a topic could be asthma or air pollution. A subtopic under that might be air pollution's impact on breathing disorders, even narrower, childhood asthma. An issue would be, does air pollution cause higher incidence of childhood asthma? Please note that the example I'm about to give is intentionally vague, so that if anybody's listening to this presentation thinking they're going to write an essay after watching it, you'll not be able to, although you might have a good idea of what to go do. You just won't be able to write it off in my presentation. All right, so a claim. We have an opinion. Everybody's got one, right? Claim is air pollution causes increased cases of juvenile asthma. Maybe we Googled a little bit and we decided, hey, I could probably find some evidence to support that would be worthwhile. Or maybe we went and talked to people and we were like, okay, well, my friend Sally, her daughter has asthma, and she said that when the air pollution is really high, it causes her daughter's asthma to flare up. So I think I could prove this. All right, so now we've got a claim. We did some initial reconnaissance. We've got a claim. Now we're going to come up with premises. That's the reasons why. So X, Y, and Z. We're going to have 3 premises for this particular argument. So now we've got a claim and we've got some premises. Now what do we got to do? Well, we've got to go out and find some proof that the premises are actually viable, right? Support or prove them. And that's where we've got our evidence down here at proof. We could find studies, we could find expert testimony. Be careful about how you identify an expert. We'll talk about that later in the class. But that's where your proof goes. It hangs from each premise. Your premises then prove or support the claim. And that, my friends, is how you form an argument. Like air pollution causes increased cases of juvenile asthma based on X, Y, and Z. The X, Y, and Z are your premises. And then you have proof that support each of those premises, and all those premises then that you've proved or supported feed back to prove or support the claim. That's how it works. All right, now that you've formed an argument, we have to do some self-examination of ourselves, and when we're doing audience analysis, we project what we think the audience might have in terms of assumptions. The first type of assumption we're going to discuss is value assumptions. So value assumptions, they're how you think the world should be. They should contain the word should, right? So shoulda, coulda, woulda. Should for value assumptions. Examples. Students should submit their homework on time. Students should try their best on every assignment. Students should listen to every single word I say. Not going to happen. You, my friend, just thought about a reality assumption in response to my value assumptions. A reality assumption is, states how you think the world really is. And they're stated as if it is reality, your own personal truth, if you like to follow Oprah's version there. Note that not everyone has the same opinion about what reality is. It might be slightly different. You might meet somebody who has the exact same view on reality as you. Doesn't necessarily mean you're right, it just means you happen to share opinions. All right, some examples of reality assumptions would be students submit homework late for a variety of reasons like procrastination, not asking for help early, and overscheduling. These sound a little bit like claims. I'm making a claim about what I think reality is. It's an assumption, but you won't see any premises there. Students prioritize their time and thus are not going to give their assignments all of their effort all the time. Students think that they can skim through a lecture, get the gist, improvise their way through assignments. Sometimes it works for them, sometimes it doesn't. These are my reality assumptions. Real values. Real values are those values that you put into practice in your life. Think of them like reality values. Your values in reality. Easy ways to remember these. These are value assumptions that you act upon. So for instance, my value assumption might be, I think students should submit work on time. When I act upon it, a real value, when I was a student, I never submitted a late assignment. Or as a facilitator, I never submit any kind of feedback late. Ideal values. These are ideals that you hold on to, but don't act upon. When you act upon them, they actually become real rather than an ideal value. So all of your values that are real values, they all start out as ideals, and then when you act upon them, they become a real value. So we often use reality assumptions to rationalize why we don't act upon an ideal value. For instance, a value assumption may be students should try their best on every assignment. A reality assumption that I have about the same thing is that students prioritize their time and thus not every class or assignment matters to them. My ideal value would be, it would be nice if students turned in their homework on time the majority of the time. But I could say, oh, well, that student just didn't prioritize their time today, or didn't think this assignment was worthwhile, or they had other stuff going on in their lives, and that's why they didn't act on that idealized value, that value assumption. So we might use it to rationalize our reality assumptions. We might use to rationalize why we don't act upon the values. Those are things we should keep in the back of our head so that we know, hey, why am I making this choice? Is it because I really want to? Or is it because I've got reality assumptions that perhaps need to be adjusted so they fit better with my value or ideal value? So here we've come to the end of our presentation about claims and premises and evidence and issues and topics and subtopics. We've talked about values, etc. One thing I kind of want to leave you with is, you know, the structure of an argument. You can also think about your values as adding color to your claims and adding color to your premises. It might be the paint color on the walls, right? This particular shade that you give your claim and premises have everything to do with your idealized and real values, as well as your value assumptions and your reality assumptions. Make sure when you're phrasing those that they match your audience. If they don't, address the differences when you're presenting your argument. For instance, if my value assumption is that every student should submit their assignments on time, and I present to a bunch of very busy employed students, I'm going to have to state how they could actually submit all their assignments on time. How maybe I submitted all my assignments on time as an actual student in their shoes working 40 plus hours a week and going to school full time. I'm going to have to add that in because I'm going to have to overcome my audience's preconceived differences in values, in reality assumptions, and idealized values, and so forth. So food for thought. I look forward to seeing you in class, and have a great day.